Hey everybody, welcome back to Conscientious Omnivore. My name is Pal. Today I'm going to be doing a sort of a follow-up video to one that I did recently on Dr. Avi and his claims about organic vegetable produce being carnist. So if you haven't seen that video, I do recommend checking it out. It's a very long video, it's almost 2 hours long. I feel like I pretty thoroughly, in great detail, go through the argument and show why it doesn't make sense. Either from a deontological or a consequentialist framework, as he claims to be on this threshold deontological, ethical stance. I don't think it makes sense in either framework, but I go through the science showing how basically, if anything, there's probably more environmental damage and harm to animals and to people in conventional, or as a result of conventional farming versus organic farming. And so far, I haven't really seen any kind of rebuttal by Dr. Avi, except to nitpick some words about the ethical parts that I put in the video. But yeah, anyway, that's neither here nor there. This video is actually kind of a follow-up to the original video, and it's going to actually be talking about the kind of fundamental claim that Avi made, which I sort of just took for granted that he had actually looked into and gotten his numbers, which is the claim that there is a roughly 1:4, 1:5 ratio of manure used by organic farming versus conventional farming, and that's obviously not as a total but as a per product basis, as Avi likes to point out, because he concedes that organic farming is such a small percentage of the total farming that is done. So it doesn't make any sense to talk about overall usage. It makes sense to talk about a per product usage. And I had actually received a kind of helpful link to a video where he actually goes into how he comes up with this ratio, and it would be laughable if it wasn't such a serious topic and have serious consequences of basically giving veganism a bad rap, in my mind, and putting people off from veganism. So that's why I'm doing this video again. It is not meant as a hate video on Dr. Avi. Avi, if you're watching this, again, my offer still stands just like it has right from the beginning. You want to hash this out, happy to discuss this with you live or in response videos, whatever you prefer. I'm happy to do it on this channel, on your YouTube channel, or on a impartial third-party YouTube channel, serving as a moderator or no moderator. I don't mind. I'm perfectly happy to do either. I will not be going on Discord. It is a circus freak show, and I will not be going there. Also, I'm going to talk about that later in the video, but the audio quality is extremely poor there. There isn't an easy way to share screens or talk about actual, studies or show things on the screen. It's just a really poor means of communication, and I won't be taking part in that. So if you're still going to be just saying, yeah, come on Discord and we'll talk about it, then sorry, that's not going to happen. But anyway, let's get into it. There's kind of a lot to talk about, so I'll try to go pretty quickly. Okay, so this first video is basically where Dr. Avi actually admits that he doesn't have a figure for how much manure is used by organic versus conventional, and that it's simply an inference based on the FAO report. When I saw this, I was actually floored by this admission. I had just assumed, based on the kind of confidence with which he had been throwing around this 1:4, 1:5 ratio in so many examples, talking with me, with Michelle, with other people, with Foot Soldier, with other people, that I had assumed he had some actual data to look at to assert this statement. And here we find out that it's simply an inference. So we're gonna just jump right into it and hear where he states that this is an inference.
Involved too.
Yeah, sure. So the data comes from, it's an inference that comes from the FAO. So the FAO looks at the nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus that are used from manure and used from synthetic fertilizers. Are you following so far?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just that where would I find? Could I look at this?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so then there's like a long kind of several minutes of trying to find the link, and there again is no easy way to just share the screen, and so you end up wasting like 15 minutes just trying to give the guy the poor link and the study. Then they are lost on which pages the thing is and whatever. It's barely legible in the video, but I was able to kind of peruse the link and pull it up here. So this is the report that the long fabled report by Dr. Avi that shows what he claims is a 1-to-4 ratio of fertilizer from manure being used by organic versus conventional. So this is the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, and it's a report on nitrogen inputs to agriculture soils from livestock manure. And basically they go to page 20, so we're just going to scroll down, and this was actually some of the confusion, is that they are not actually on page 20 of the PDF, they are on page 20 of the report. So if you have to actually look at the little page numbers down at the bottom in the left hand corner. So they go to page 20, well, we're almost there. Here we go, page 20 of the Americas region. And I'm going to actually just jump to the section where Avi is explaining to this person who he's debating, Tell Automatic or whatever the guy's name is, I don't know, about the manure. And just so you guys can see it, because it's hard to kind of see it because you don't see it in the Discord discussion, they're looking at this chart here on page 20, and you can see that manure applied to soils is this line here that's kind of steady at the bottom. It's gone up slightly, ever so slightly. It's maybe at around 5 million tons of nitrogen at the end of this chart. There is a green line, which is the manure left on pasture, so that is not directly applied for growing other kinds of things. It's just like wherever the animals are probably grazing and stuff, it's the manure that's left there. And then there is the synthetic fertilizer line, which is this line that's creeping up and accelerating upward, which is, of course, the thing that I talked about in my video, saying how it's made usually from the result of fracking. It's basically fossil fuel industry that creates the synthetic fertilizer for the most part, and much of it comes from fracking. So watch that video if you haven't seen it. So that's roughly, whatever that is, I don't know, maybe the 22 million tons of nitrogen. So this is the chart that they are talking about. And let's hear what they have to say.
Numbers.
And is this, sorry, I'm just scrolling through this. So is this referring to organic, or are we,
here's where the organic inference comes to. Because organic, across the board, doesn't allow for any synthetic fruit. Are you aware of that?
Organic alone. Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Okay, so this is referring to all of the farms. Now, organic doesn't allow for any synthetic fertilizers. Are you aware of that? Okay, so all of that 23 million tons, that overwhelming reliance of synthetic fertilizers that are being used by conventional farms, it's clear that that's being used by conventional farms much more than manure. There's the data. That synthetic fertilizers, they're not being used by the organic farms. So if they're not being used by the organic farms, it has to be that they're being used by the conventional farms, given those two options between organic and non-organic. Would you agree with that?
Okay, so in other words, there's like a steady 4 to 5 million that are being tons that are being used by the conventional.
No, there's a steady 20 to 20, there's a steady approximately 25 million tons of synthetic fertilizer, of nitrogen from synthetic fertilizer that's being used by conventional.
Synthetic fertilizer. Yeah, I was talking about
manure. The manure is not being used. This isn't conventional. This is all farms. it's pooled conventional. That manure usage is pooled conventional and organic. If you were to only do conventional, usage would drop even further.
And where do I see that data? That's not
because no, it's an inference because organic doesn't use any synthetic fertilizer. They're fully reliant on non-fertilizers or on non-synthetic fertilizer sources. So look, this is the data from everything pooled together. Now, if we were to just look at organic, all of that nitrogen being used for synthetic fertilizers would be gone because they don't allow any synthetic fertilizers. Are we in agreement so far?
Yeah.
Okay, so then where does the rest of their nitrogen demand come from? So if we're at a starting point of 5 million, and we're just going to standardize all this to the amount of food produced, then where does the rest of their nitrogen come from? If they can't get it from the synthetic fertilizers.
Well, one would think from the animal manure.
Yeah, the animal manure. That's based on the data. That's where the overwhelming reliability comes from.
But this is where I'm.
So he just kind of mumbles off there at the end, but this is just mind-blowing to me that this is what he is basing his claim on for the past whatever he's been arguing this for, past year and a half or 2 years or however long he's been arguing about organic as carnists. He's got no data, no proof, and he's making a completely incorrect, illogical, just mind-blowingly, quite frankly, stupid, division to get this this ratio. So what you have to realize is what he's basically coming up with is he's taking the millions of tons of synthetic fertilizer, which is the roughly 22 million or whatever, and he's dividing it by the roughly 5 million tons of the manure, and he's getting a ratio of about 1 to 4, or it's 4.4 if you divide 22 by 5. So it's like he's just calling that the 1 to 4 or 1 to 5 ratio, and the other areas of the world are kind of similar, although Asia's way higher. But anyway, that's what he's basing his claim on. And there's kind of this kind of moment where I thought the guy debating him is going to almost call him on this, but then he just I think he just got confused. He didn't really understand what happened, and then he just sort of goes on and starts talking about some other stuff, and he just kind of gives this to Avi. But I just wish I had seen this sooner. I had actually never seen Avi talk about where he got that figure. I had assumed it was based on some kind of actual reports or studies that he had looked at, and it turns out that he's done basically nothing, no amount of actual research, and he's just making a really stupid, unsubstantiated claim based on this report. Now, I'm going to show you an example here that will clarify this in case this is at all confusing to you and why this doesn't make sense. If you look at something like this, now these are just made up numbers. I'm just doing this to prove the example here, the point. If I say that, look, within the past year, there were 22 million meat-based burgers sold in the U.S. or in North America or whatever, and there were only 5 million veggie burgers sold. The way that Avi's inference works is that basically what I would say is okay, there's 22 million meat burgers sold, and who's buying that? Well, obviously it's carnists, because vegans by definition can't buy the meat-based burgers. And then the 5 billion divided into the 22 billion is about 4.4, so it's exactly 4.4. It's about 1 to 4. So therefore we know that vegans consume veggie burgers at a ratio of roughly 1 to 4 compared to, or 4 to 1, depending on which way you're looking at it, compared to carnists. That's the analogy he's made with the manure being used. He's literally just taken two things that are not the same thing. One is synthetic, one is manure. He's divided them to get some kind of ratio, and then he's claiming that that is the ratio of the manure used. So what you need to understand about this example is that just because the one item is exclusive to a particular group, like the meat burgers are exclusive to the meat eaters, that does not mean that the other group, the second category, which is the veggie burgers, is exclusive to the vegans, just like the manure isn't exclusive to the organic. So you could have any number of carnist people buying the veggie burgers occasionally, as we see is happening right now. There's tons and tons of people eating Beyond Meat and Impossible Burgers and all these other products that are not vegans. So in the same exact manner, you can't just say divide these ratios and they'll somehow give you some kind of information about who's eating the veggie burgers. This will only, the only thing you can infer from this type of limited data is just how many meat burgers you're selling and how many veggie burgers you're selling. You can't infer anything based on who's eating the veggie burger. You can only infer who's not eating from the meat burger based on like the vegan ethos and ethics. But so the same way, that's what I'm trying to say, the same way you cannot infer who is using the manure based on just that report that Avi is citing. That is a key flaw. He's just completely like just beyond ridiculous, like illogical with how he arrived at that number by dividing those figures. It's like mind-blowingly like wrong. Like, I mean, I can't believe that nobody has called him on this before. I couldn't believe this, like that this was what he was going on. Now, this was bad enough, and he's been doing this. I mean, there's just so many examples of this. You can just see where he does this. But again, it's like he's equating two things that are not the same. One is the synthetic, one is the manure. He's just doing the math. He's dividing, the 5 into the 22, getting the roughly 1-to-4 ratio, and then he's saying that is how the manure is split up. That makes no sense. Like, and I'm going to show you guys why. But just so you know that, what I'm saying is actually like what he's claiming. Here's where he talks to Michelle and he cites this 1-to-4 claim again.
The answer is yes, and we can go through the data on that. So the answer is yes, there is a differential. The ratio is about 1-to-4.
So they're, again, talking about the manure, where that organic uses 4 times the amount of manure that conventional does. And he's basing that on this FAO report by simply dividing the 22 million tons of synthetic fertilizer by the 5 million tons of manure. But this doesn't make any sense because organic farming in North America is such a small percentage of the total agriculture that in order for the 1-to-4 ratio to come out from those numbers, even though it doesn't even make sense at all, but for it to even come out like that, you would have to actually have all 5 million tons being used, or you could say most, let's say virtually all, the 5 million tons being used by organic. And if you look at organic farming in North America, this is from Wikipedia. I know people are going to say you can't cite Wikipedia. I'm going to cite other sources too, but just as an overview, I'm showing you guys this. In North America, almost 2.2 million hectares are managed organically, representing approximately 0.6% share of the total agriculture area. So it's not even 1%. It's 0.6% of the total agricultural area is for organic. Okay, now let's see. There is a report here. This is about organic stats worldwide. These are from 2017. You can actually see that, where is it? 1.1% of the agricultural land is organic. This is for global figures. This is 179 countries that were looked at, and only 1.1% globally is organic. So again, like I showed you in North America, it's 2.2 for North America. Here they have stats for United States of America specifically. It's 2 million hectares. So again, this 2.2 for organic for North America is probably pretty on par, pretty correct based on what I just showed you guys from the Wikipedia article. And you can look through this report. You can check it out yourself. Go to other things. Here is a USDA organic survey that was done. This was from 2017. These are the stats that are cited by the Wikipedia article. They're talking about the value of the organic market. So again, this is just to corroborate what's stated here. You can look through this yourself. Basically, it's a tiny percent of what is actually farmed land going towards organic. So what this means is that he thinks that basically all or virtually almost all of the manure, the 5 million tons, is being used by less than 1%. So 0.6% of all animal, all agriculture. 0.6% of all agriculture in North America, or in America, if we want to look at that, is responsible for using the 5 million tons of manure for organic farming, or virtually all of the 5 million. That's the only way that ratio comes out. And again, it doesn't even make sense to have that ratio. It doesn't even make sense to talk about it because it's apples to oranges. It's not the same thing. It makes no sense whatsoever. If the 0.6% of all the animal agriculture land was taking virtually all of the manure from the entire agricultural output, it would be drowning in the poop. There would be like nothing left. So to think that this tiny fraction of the agricultural sector is taking virtually all or all of the manure from the entire rest is just completely stupid. I'm usually far more polite in my videos than this, but this is just mind-blowing to me. I can't believe that this is what his claims are based on. Now, I was gonna make this video and just end it here, but then when I was looking at the timestamps for the video here for you guys, just in the past couple days when I was trying to put this together, I saw that Dr. Avi had put out a new video on the Ask Yourself Discord. And here the title, as you can see, he gleefully explains new organic data. Now, I just want to say a couple things about this. One is that he's gleeful because he finally has some numbers to actually show people instead of trying to make really stupid and really illogical inferences that are completely wrong. And that's why he's gleeful, and that's why he's, basically telling people to go suck on penises and stuff and whatever in the middle of this, because he thinks he's finally got some numbers. And I just think it's really, really telling that somebody like this would go around calling long-term ethical vegans carnists and organic carnists and whatever other kind of stupid terms, because he incorrectly inferred something really stupid about manure usage. And now he's finally found some kind of numbers to actually show that what he's saying and has been claiming all along is actually correct. What that means is that he didn't have anything before, and now he's finally happy that he has something to show people. Now, let's get into what he actually is showing here. So let's just listen for a little bit here. He's providing claims on a study that came out that he says shows that manure usage is about between 4 and 5 times more in organic versus conventional. So let's hear what he has to say.
Maybe 5, and then you add 1 or 2 more. So 37. So when you do the ratio out, when you calculate the ratio, it's about 1 to 4.8.
Okay, so he's copied and pasted a little screenshot from a report, and he's basically visually inspecting it and adding up some numbers and doing some weird stuff off screen that you can't even tell what he's doing. And then he's talking about how he's averaging things and admitting that things shouldn't actually be averaged because, people aren't getting the calories evenly from the different categories and blah, 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 blah. But he basically says back of the envelope calculation, you come out to this 4.8, which is what he's been claiming all along. So let's look at the actual report that he's citing. Again, it took a little bit of trying to see this horrifically low-grade quality video, trying to get the link, but I managed to find it. So this is a, as of yet, not published study, I guess, and it's accepted manuscript. I don't know if that means that this has actually been peer-reviewed yet and it just hasn't been published, or if it's going to be published and it already has passed peer review. I don't know, and that's not what I'm going to talk about anyway, so I'm not trying to call it into question per se. I'm going to just talk about the limitations of the study as explained by the authors of the study in the study. So let's jump into it. From the introduction, you can basically see what they're doing. They're trying to look at nitrogen losses and compare them from organic versus conventional. And the reason why is because everybody knows that conventional farming using synthetic fertilizer is bad for the environment. It's bad for water. It's bad for a whole host of things, including soil health and long-term, topsoil erosion, dead zones in the ocean, all these kinds of things, atmospheric nitrogen, contributing to greenhouse effects, et cetera, et cetera. So the reason why they're looking at this is because they want to see, can you reduce your nitrogen, kind of like contribution by going all organic. That's kind of the aim of the study. So this is actually not really helping Avi's case overall, talking about the overall, effects and benefit or harm of eating a conventional diet versus a organic diet. But that's neither here nor there, because we're talking specifically about kind of, his claims. So if we jump to page 4 here, I just wanted to highlight a couple things here. There is a line here: more than 95% of the food grown and raised in the United States is produced through conventional methods. So again, I'm just like highlighting again that, I don't know exactly where they got this. They say they got this from the USDA from 2012. The figures that I showed you, it's claiming far less if you look at it as a percentage of the land used. I don't think that jives with this figure, because everybody claims that organic is actually lower yield, although I've shown in my other video that in some cases it can actually be much higher yield using veganic methods. But again, neither here nor there. Like, the general numbers are, it's way more conventional is produced than organic. So this just further proves my point that if you even think 5% is going to be using all of the manure, it's just completely wrong. But anyway, so let's jump to page 6. Okay, page 6, here we go. It is estimated that 70 to 85% of the nitrogen inputs to conventional agriculture are in the forms of new nitrogen, while about 15 to 30% are from recycled nitrogen sources like animal manure, compost, or crop residues. This is, again, basically saying that conventional uses 85% of the nitrogen from the synthetic, and 15 to 30. So again, this is kind of funny because they're giving a range, 70 to 85. But basically 15 to 30 is coming from the other stuff like compost, manure, crop residues, etc. So this is already showing you that that 5 million that he used to come up with the 1-to-4 ratio from the FAO report is complete nonsense, because at least, even on the low end of the spectrum, 15% of that would have been used by the conventional. But even that makes no sense, because again, like, it's not 15% of the 5 million, because they're 95% responsible for all agriculture. So it would be way more as a percentage of the total. It's just more like as in the per product consumption. So the actual farming of a specific thing like tomatoes, potatoes, whatever, that would be coming 15% for that particular thing from the other forms. So the manure, the compost, etc. But the overall, it would be way higher, because they are accounting for 95% of the actual total output of food produced. So this is just, again, like, just going totally counter to what he had previously claimed from the FAO. Okay, page number 17 here, you can see, note that because organic and conventional virtual nitrogen factors were calculated using different data sources, it is not possible to make any conclusions regarding the statistical significance of these differences, despite the standardized use of methods and calculations. So they're basically admitting that a pretty strong limitation of this study, this is in the results section here, is that because they're using figures and data from various sources, they cannot be, it's not possible, it says, it is not possible to make any conclusions regarding the statistical significance of these differences. So the whole result of the report, in my mind, is kind of called into question by this. If something is not statistically significant, how much weight do you want to actually give this report? again, I'm not trying to take apart the report. I'm just saying that like Avi is bringing this report as his proof of his claim all along. But we can already see that this disproves what he was claiming before. So if anything, he should be apologizing to people and saying, yeah, sorry guys, I made up that number and I'm completely wrong. And not trying to use this to justify the other number. Even if this number that he claims to have come up with is the same number, it doesn't prove that what he was saying before was correct. It proves that it just by random chance ended up being the same number as dividing the other two numbers, even though they have no relation to each other whatsoever. Okay, so here we go. Right at the end here, this is across all food groups, organic production in the U.S. has the potential to release 50% less new nitrogen to the environment than conventional production per unit nitrogen consumed by people. This is a huge point against Avi's claim, basically saying that organic is carnist, because what this is saying is that by eating organic, you have the potential to release 50% less new nitrogen into the environment, which is causing all these problems as I detailed in the other video. So this is not helping his case. Obviously he didn't talk about this part of the report. Okay, page 28 here, this is the talking about the footprint. This suggests that switching to an entirely organic diet is not a viable way to reduce one's nitrogen footprint. Instead, reducing consumption of animal protein generally and reducing food waste at the consumer level both have a more significant impact on nitrogen footprint. What they're talking about here is if somebody switched their diet from a fully 100% conventional diet to a fully 100% organic diet. And if you do that, you're actually going to reduce certain nitrogen footprint. But if you don't make any changes and you're still eating a lot of animal products, specifically beef, it was interesting because beef had a higher nitrogen footprint for the organic versus the conventional that they analyzed. But even if you don't look at that, you're actually saving a little bit of nitrogen, but they assumed that basically people would just eat a standard diet, which would include beef. And when you look at that, if you don't make any changes to your eating habits, you're still eating hamburgers, etc., and you're just going all organic, then your nitrogen footprint is actually not going to change. And they even acknowledge in the report that that is happening because of the huge difference and offset for the nitrogen from beef. So again, though, the point here is that if you want to have a big impact, you want to reduce your animal products. That's the whole point here. And if you do look through the report, if anything, it makes the case that going organic, you're actually going to reduce your nitrogen footprint if you're not eating the animal products. It's the animal product, specifically the beef, that's actually making it kind of a wash. But again, it's just something important to note that it's actually, if you're reading the report and kind of trying to understand what they're trying to get at, it's not helping Avi's case at all. Again, from page 28, if you look at the input types and nitrogen recycling, our analysis thus implies that organic production adds less nitrogen to the global nitrogen pool per unit food product, and therefore reduces the overall impact of anthropogenic nitrogen in the environment. And as I detailed in the other video, that's a huge problem, and we definitely want to do that. It's basically building up the greenhouse gases and hurting the environment, thereby killing people, killing animals, ruining the ecology of the planet we live on. So again, another case for actually having more people buy organic, not less. From page 29, however, current organic agricultural practices are often dependent on recycled nitrogen inputs from conventional systems. This is something that I actually talked about in my other video, where there's a lot of organic farms that use manure from conventional farms. So, again, Avi's claim that you're supporting, animal agriculture because you're buying organic, because it's the manure, you're actually supporting conventional farming by buying organic sometimes, and it's actually very difficult to find out when they're using manure from organic farms versus when they're using it from conventional farms. look at that video. I give several details and studies talking about that as well. They're acknowledging it here as well. Just wanted to point that out. The end of this page, the most important limitation regards the availability of data on organic production. They're talking about limitations and uncertainties here. The USDA does not track rates of organic fertilizer application or recommendations on a national scale. Therefore, this analysis relied on data published in the scientific literature, including some data from outside the US. This data may or may not be representative of the variety of practices in organic production in the US. So again, this is a pretty strong limitation. We don't know which parts of this data were used from which countries outside of the US and how that may differ from what's being done in the US. But again, Avi is trying to make it seem like this is an open and shut case, that like this proves his claim. Just wanted to point that out. Okay, if we look at page 30, this is actually a very important part, and I talked about this in the other video as well. The storage of nitrogen in organic matter in the soil is not addressed in this study, nor is it accounted for in most available studies on nitrogen balances in crop systems. Because the virtual N factor, nitrogen factor, is a loss-based metric, we assume here that soil organic nitrogen is at a steady state and does not change over time. But in fact, many organic systems increase organic matter and thus soil nitrogen content. And basically, this is going back to something I talked about in the other video. Using synthetic nitrogen actually depletes the soil of its capability to store nitrogen effectively. And what you are seeing is you have to use more and more nitrogen to get the same amount of output. It's becoming less and less efficient. The soil is losing its ability to store nitrogen. It's also losing its ability to store carbon dioxide, which is a huge problem too. So it's a double whammy. You have to use more nitrogen, which causes more runoff, more destruction, more dead zones, more dead fish, more dead animals of all kinds, more poisoning of well water for human consumption and other animal consumption, all this kind of stuff. It's a huge, massive problem, and this study is also proving that point. Now, the next point here is at the end of page 30 again. While our study is thus able to compare the loss of nitrogen to the environment from organic versus conventional systems, it does not assess how nitrogen loss from the two systems will ultimately impact the environment. So again, this is going back to the video I talked about before, the impact of artificial nitrogen on the environment, the ecology, water, dead zones, etc., is actually far worse. It is far worse to the greenhouse gas effect than the manure alone. Now, there are huge problems with the manure. I'm not saying that there aren't, and I talk about that in the other video as well. But again, if we're looking at kind of the summation of everything, all the harm caused by the additional demand for manure in organic, versus all the negatives associated with using, synthetic fertilizer and conventional, it far outweighs the harm that you're doing by consuming more manure. So this study is not addressing that, and they're being honest about it. They're telling you that. But do you think Avi mentioned that in his video? No, he didn't. Okay, so for the rounding out of this study, I just want to jump to the actual chart that he took little bits of and put into the screenshot in the video. This is the chart showing you organic at the top, conventional at the bottom, and it's showing you the various nitrogen inputs from the various sources. The dark blue is the synthetic nitrogen. The lighter blue, the medium blue, I guess, is the stuff like nitrogen fixated by certain plants. And then the green stuff is the green manures, compost, manures, animal, byproducts like blood meal and feathers and all this kind of stuff. That's the lightest color, which is this one here that you can see. This second lightest color green is, what was that? That's compost. Then the next one is recycled legume cover crop, and then this color green is the crop residue, and recycled manure is this kind of dark green, I guess. Avi is claiming that he's arrived at this 4.8 calculation based on just looking at the chart visually And he's just saying like, oh, this bar is, roughly, I don't know what that is, maybe 8 or 9. And then this one is, I don't know, maybe 2. So that's 4 times as much. This one, there's, nothing here, or you can't see it. So that's, obviously worse. Here, there's nothing in both. Here, there's, nothing in this, and there's more in this. It's like he's just adding things up, dividing things off screen. You don't even know where he's calculating things from. You don't even know what these numbers are. They don't tell you in this report, as far as I can see. He's just going off of this graph, and in the video he's talking about counting the pixels and whatever, and then he's averaging things. He's literally making up numbers again. So I just want to sum up this video by saying that even if the numbers are correct based on this particular report, and even if you did somehow get the actual numbers and you did actually add them, and I'm not talking about looking at the screen and counting pixels as Avi would have you do. I'm talking about like actually talking to the researchers or getting their figures of where they're, pulling all this stuff from. And again, bearing in mind all of the limitations that they expressly, cite in the study. But even assuming all of that stuff, if it does come out to the roughly 4 times more manure used per product by organic versus conventional, that is still, that's still fine. It doesn't mean that Avi's right about organic being carnist, and because that is, I assumed that he was right on my other video. All of the points that I made are assuming that these figures are actually correct and that it's roughly a 1-to-4, 1-to-5 ratio. So this is in no way any kind of like redemption for his claims. But I just want to point out that if this is what he's got now, this is what he's like almost, giddy with excitement over, and like telling, people to, I don't even know, whatever, like telling people off. I just think it's laughable because it proves that he had nothing before. And the fact that he had to like go and find something that isn't even published yet to prove his point really just goes to show you that he had nothing before. So that's number one. And then what he did have before is just laughable because it doesn't even make sense. He's literally just making an inference that is completely incorrect. So if this is correct, he's still wrong about the overall premise that organic is carnist. And if it's not correct, well then, then he still has no numbers. Now I'll be curious to see if this does get published or if it's already peer reviewed or it's going to get peer reviewed. But again, I'm not here to argue about whether or not organic uses more manure than conventional. I'm pretty sure it does. I mean, it kind of sounds like it's logical. It makes sense, but not for the reasons that Avi claims, and definitely not for the reasons he claimed up until very recently when he came across this report. So that's the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I apologize to anybody who thinks this is like a crazy topic. And I think, again, I want to re-emphasize what I said in the other video. This is not about veganism. This has nothing to do about veganism. This is about the ego of Avi basically trying to make a claim that, quite frankly, is completely unsubstantiated up until this report. And I do have my reservations about this report as well. But even if it is correct about the ratio, he's just completely still wrong over the overall effect of organic versus conventional, and it is really clouding the situation. It's muddying the waters for people who are just trying to get information about going vegan and giving up animal products in all ways and in all forms. That is the solution. That is what's going to solve the ecological disaster that we're facing, destroying the world for basically our taste pleasure. And none of this really matters, arguing about this versus getting people to just go vegan. And it is absolutely not helpful to try and tell people that they're not vegan because they're buying organic produce. And I'm talking about vegetable produce. I'm not talking about animals. So that's the video. Go vegan. Buy whatever fruits and veggies you want. I don't care if it's conventional. I don't care if it's organic. Buy the vegetables. That's what matters. That's what's going to change things. And if you can, and you can buy veganic, that is the best. Hands down, it's the most ethical option. It's the one with the lowest environmental, damage and destruction. Absolutely the best. Go with that. But if you can't, and if you can't afford it or can't find it in your area or whatever, it doesn't matter. Just buy the veggies, buy the fruits, buy the grains, buy the legumes, whatever, nuts and seeds. Eat plants. That's what matters. I hope you guys liked it. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel. If you want to buy a t-shirt, I got this t-shirt, Seitan, the other wheat meat. You can buy it. I got a link for that at the end. And see you guys in another video soon.